cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Good evening once again, and welcome to another Doctor on Call. It is a pleasure to be with you again, and of course we welcome you, our viewers on GBN Television, our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, and of course our listeners on K105 FM. It is a pleasure indeed. And of course we trust, as always, that at the end of our discussion this evening, there's at least one thing you can take with you to help improve your wellness. Yeah? So this week we will be talking a little bit about cervical cancer and the HPV, that's the human papillomavirus. Of course, Dr. Nixon with us as always, and it's a good time to welcome. But Dr. Nixon, good evening and welcome. It's a pleasure as always.
Well, today I'm very Chinese. Good evening. I know it's Chinese New Year, right? And it's going to be the year of the horse, of the fiery horse. I'm all fired up. It's supposed to be a year that great things are going to happen according to the Chinese zodiac. So happy Chinese New Year.
Okay. Well, I don't know much about that. So, yeah.
See, I've lived in large West Indian Chinese populations.
Very good.
So,
Well, yeah.
Everyone, it's really good to be here, and I think people would like to think that we've spoken about cancer of the cervix, which is a disease that occurs in women, ad nauseum. They try to hear that. But there's a lot going on in relation to cancer of the cervix. But I want to ask you a question before all of that. Have you ever heard about a woman named Henrietta Lacks?
No. Haven't.
Huh?
No, I haven't. I can't say that I have.
So Henrietta Lacks is a woman early in the mid-20th century, migrated from the south to I think to like DC, Baltimore area, okay? Mm-hmm. And she started having a problem, went to see the doctor. I guess she had bleeding vaginally, and she went to see the doctor. And Henrietta Lacks was basically diagnosed with cancer of the cervix. So one of the biggest challenge as a black woman, she was a brown-skinned black woman, light-skinned woman, but she was black, okay? One of the biggest challenge was access to health care and having insurance and all the rest of it. But Henrietta became a very interesting case because she's actually, you need to read that book, The Immortal World of Henrietta Lacks. And I'm advertised as the first book I read when I went to public health school. Because it takes into account so many ethical considerations that we must apply to ensure that healthcare is delivered appropriately to whomever, whenever, for whatever reason, okay, and at the best quality. So Henrietta was diagnosed with cancer of the cervix, the neck of her uterus, and was being seen at Johns Hopkins University. And they went and they extricated some cells of Henrietta Lacks. And we all know about cancer cells, how they replicate. You know, they multiply very fast, abundantly. Now, this is more than probably 75 years ago. Mm-hmm. And Henrietta cells still exist. Henrietta Lacks cells have been used for almost every big pharmacology, whatever advancement there has been in health research, especially in relation to treatment and understanding cancers, blah, blah, blah. Those cells of Henrietta, every time she went back, so it's not necessarily treated, just harvested more cells. Unethical, because she never had treatment, because Henrietta probably would have benefited from just having may have benefited from having a simple hysterectomy, the removal of a uterus, depending on the stage in which the cancer was diagnosed. However, that did not happen, and eventually she died. But Henrietta died, and despite the millions that pharmaceutical companies made then and continue to make 60, 70 years later, at that time, her family, like I said, they never offered her health insurance. She just came back, they saw her, harvested what they needed, and continued to do the research and see what would happen. It's almost like the Tuskegee experiment. You know what the patients have, how you're going to treat it. I don't know, you just want to see what's going to happen with them. And eventually she died. But it was discovered before she died that this is what was going on. So some of it was actually stopped, for want of a better word, right? Detained, the action. However, I guess way too late to give her any quality of life. Her family eventually, well, with support from other people, because this is in time of, I always want to say drunk, but you know what I mean? In the time when racism, the civil rights movement, was kind of in its embryonic stage, and you know, people were fighting for the rights of Black people. And eventually there was a lawsuit, because even none of her family was even after she died, none of them was given even health insurance. So they still had to find a way around it. That level of I guess, maybe I should say segregation, maybe I shouldn't, but racism was that, you know, the civil rights were impinged, yet they were not offered any support despite how much they were able to make advances for healthcare in general in the world. Eventually she was recognized, and I think the family is compensated. But I don't know that you can ever compensate somebody whose cells are still alive today as we speak on February 17th, 2025. So you must read that book, Immortal Life of Henrietta Lack. Not a very long read.
Yeah, I found it.
Okay. I don't remember all the details. I've read it, we've quoted it, we've used it, and I've used the ethical association around it. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lack. And I'm just going to diverge a little from cancer, because recently, as recent as last week, when we had 10 days ago, when we had our national recognition of independence, or 52nd year anniversary of independence, one of the person who had received one of the highest honor of knighthood, okay, was and this was done posthumously, meaning that the person was already dead. The person has been dead for almost 100 years, if not 100 years. A gentleman, no, he died in 1932, I think. The bottom line is that he's dead. A gentleman by the name of Walter Clement Noel, who is a Grenadian that went away in the early 1900s to study dentistry. Going up to Ohio, got sick on his way up there, developed an ulcer on his foot. No, this is the 1900s. Remember, it's still white people run things, right? However, he came from landed gentry from Sates. Brown skin, mixed, I guess. They own a lot of land and stuff. I guess those things stick you through if you had the money. He wasn't a poor Grenadian per se. But he gets to Boston on a ship and is sick with this wound on his leg, like a sore, okay? And that's the thing, you've been traveling 21 days, how many days on a ship, you're hungry, you know, your nutrition, and they give him vitamins and stuff, and that went. And he went off to University of Ohio, I think. And he would get sick every so often. And one day, one of the young doctors decided to take a sample of his blood and look at it under the microscope. Because think about it, 100 years ago, we didn't have as many means of evaluating patients as we do today. Today, you can take a drop of blood, spin it, take out all the cells, and take a drop of the secretions in the what we call the serum, and do assay testing and find out 20 things about the person. Or you can take DNA, which is very, very small material out of somebody's body cells, right? And figure out what gender, who the mother is, who the grandfather is, 20 generations before, what diseases they have, what diseases they're likely to have, you name it. So advances have really, technology has really advanced in relation to research and understanding how the human body works. And Walter Clement Noel became the first person to be diagnosed with sickle cell. You recognize these strain cells under the microscope, and here was this guy with this. Even she came back and died from pneumonia. It's one of the things that happen if you're not taken if you're not treated appropriately, and if you don't consider, especially with full-blown sickle cell disease, this is what he had. Speaking to a relative of his the other day who told me she actually discovered when she was about to have her own child that she had a trait because we screen all women for sickle cell. Okay? And I'm just saying this to say that even we have had our say as Grenadians, because I'll tell you, research now is guided by severe ethical principles. So you can't do research on people who are homeless and live on the street. You can't do research on people who are incarcerated. You can't. Do you understand? You can't do research on children without parents' consent. You can't research on anybody without their consent. One is a human subject. So think about it. A black man in the early 1900s subjected to research. We don't know whether he had the same experiences as Henrietta Lacks, but we know and we honor the fact that he opened the door for us to understand a lot better all over the world, because 1 in 15 people who are of the black race carry the gene, and we see it in our population. So I'm just saying it aside. So going back to Henrietta, I want us to understand that there are lots of things that didn't happen for her that we don't want to happen for our women. And why don't we? We don't want this to happen because our women must have access to care. The ethical mistakes or whatever, misgivings, whatever you want to call them, that occurred 75 years ago should not happen. The very fact that cancer of the cervix kills is the second cause of cancer death in our female population makes it relatively significant. And I think it's 10 women every 10,000 population, right, will have cancer, cervical cancer every year. That's a lot, okay? And I want to say it's a lot, especially when you consider the fact that we can prevent cervical cancer, or cancer of the cervix, okay? So these are all aside. There's no a program to, as we have more and more information based on experience, based on research, we have real up-to-date scientific information as to what causes cancer of the cervix and what can we do to prevent it. How do we diagnose it? And hopefully we can diagnose it early, right? Who are the women that are at risk for developing cancer of the cervix? And how are we going to diagnose it? How are we going to do our own research by collecting information from our own population? Remember Walter Clement Noel? Before him, there was nobody who had that kind of information, right? I remember Henrietta Lacks gave her cells so we could, her cells were taken so we could understand. But within our population, we need to understand, are we being affected by the same set of viruses that cause us to have it? And we're going to talk about the viruses. We need to make sure that information is collected properly. We need to make sure that that where we can prevent, we use preventive measures, that information is collected so we know we don't make that other mistake down the road when it comes to understanding how HPV and how cervical cancer affects our population. So tonight we're going to talk, and I want to talk about this because tonight, as we speak, we're about to set up a program which is a little more advanced than we've had. We've had screening and treatment and diagnosis and all the rest of cancer in cervical cancer in Grenada. But now we're going to have a program that's a little more specific, that's a little more structured, that's a little more disseminated within the population, and hopefully not only available in the public sector as per government places, but that all the persons all the stakeholders, clinicians, people who do screening will have the same access to or the same capacity to deliver the services that are required by women in Grenada, regardless of which nook and cranny we find it. All right. So what is cancer? Do I have to say it again? Cancer This is a disease or a situation where a woman, or no, people, or an organ in your body will start to make cells more rapidly than it really should. So you're born with a certain amount of cells, right? Every organ has a certain amount of cells. Those little units that make up things. So you have kidney cells, and you have hair cells, and you have eye cells, and you have, skin cells, and whatever organ you have, right? Cervix, liver, you name it, lung. And yes, your body does change all the cells, it repairs. Okay, you eat proper food, your body gets rid of some cells, and it makes new ones, right? But it only makes what it has, it doesn't make more. But sometimes there is something, and there are lots of factors that we know can contribute. Sometimes there's something that makes those cells multiply a lot faster. And so these cells start to multiply very, very, very quickly. And they need a lot of food, and they're hungry, and they start to infiltrate, go into all the cells around it, and eventually they spread to other parts. And just this rapid proliferation, this is like putting peroxide in vinegar, right? And everything that's brought up and gets crazy. And this continues, and eventually the person will die because the body cannot combat the level of activity and the damage to the cells near, or the disappearance of the function of the organ, right? Or the toxins that are made from the organs becoming damaged, or the affecting of other organs in the distance, and you have so many organs that becomes so affected that you can't you're gonna die. Your body just can't manage this craziness. Is like ants nest takeover. Okay, everything is damaged. So that is basically cancer. However, cancer of the cervix happens in women because only women have a cervix. You just think of the uterus as a little pawpaw. Not a big old pawpaw we have on your children. The little ones, a little fancy one, a little head, right? And the bigger part of it is up inside of the abdomen. And then they have that little part that sticks down, right? The neck, right? That sticks out into the vaginal area. Okay? That's where from where you're going to have the blood coming out of during the period. That's where you're going to have the sperms penetrating to go up into the body of the uterus for fertilization and housing a fetus, a baby that's being cultivated. Okay. Now, the cervix is subjected to contact, to trauma during intercourse. Okay? What we have discovered in recent years, relatively recent years, is that, first of all, women who have not been sexually active, who have never had sexual intercourse, have, 0% chance of developing cancer of the cervix. Simply because there is a virus called human papilloma virus. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to call it HPV because it's easier to say that, because sometimes when you're talking fast, the HPV, the human papilloma virus things get a little twisted up. So we've discovered that the women who have cancer of the cervix have all had HPV. We also know that almost every woman, most women who have been sexually active already have HPV because it's probably the most common sexually transmitted infection. For the most part, your body will take care of it, obliterate. So you might find somebody have HPV now, and then when you check them a couple of years later, there's no HPV because your body is actually supposed to be set up to take care of these foreign agents that come into it. But not so in all women. So we know that women who have been sexually active are the ones who are at greater risk for getting this virus called this HPV, human papilloma virus. And that it is now considered the agent that causes the changes in the cells, in the lining of the cervix, right? So that the cells start multiplying crazy, can't contain, okay? And it depends on when you examine it. You examine the cervix. You will decide whether or not there's an infection, there is any inflammation, because it will cause inflammation first, redness. You don't have a good cervix today and cancer tomorrow. You get an infection, it gets inflamed, and it breaks down, and so you have cervical cancer. No. And I say this to remind us that we tell our women to do their pap smears every year or every 2 years, depending on what you found, right? Because you don't go from having normal cells to cancerous cells. It takes time. There are changes. And the changes that are seen can be treated to prevent cancer developing. Right? Now, there are probably 100 different species of HPV. So it's like buying ice cream. There's ice cream, and then there's vanilla, there's chocolate, and Grenada chocolate, and pistachio, and sunset, and whatever, rock, and rocky road. And do you understand, right? Grape nut. So there are different varieties of this one breast. It's all ice cream. It's all PAPS. It's all HPV, but different kinds. We know that there's some kinds that are more likely to cause cancer of the cervix. Number 16 and number 18, out of the 100 or so types, right, are more likely to cause. So, doesn't it make sense that if you're going to get a pap smear done, that if you can do an HPV test, you would know that what your risk is of having cancer? If the HPV is present, then maybe I have a slight risk. If there's no HPV, then there's no chance of you developing cervical cancer. How do we prevent that? What do we do then? And we've had a lot of hullabaloo about it, and I want parents and grandparents and families in general to understand. There is an HPV vaccine, okay? Human papillomavirus vaccine, which prevents infection. So if you get in contact with the vaccine, when a woman comes in contact, they get married, they have an intercourse, right? Your partner might have the virus. That vaccine will prevent you from getting the virus. If you prevent it from getting the virus, then you should not have cancer of the cervix. You got me?
Right.
Right? If you prevent him from getting the virus, then you should not have cancer of the cervix. The vaccine is given to girls between the age of 9 to 14 as part of the routine program of immunization in Grenada. And there's a reason why, because the younger the population, the higher the immune response. In other words, if you give girls between 9 and 14, we know that the immunity that they're likely to have would be longer, would last longer, would be more intense, so that once they come in contact with this human papillomavirus, their bodies can take care of it and eliminate it. You get my drive?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, but that is not the only thing that's going to keep a woman from dying from cervical cancer or even developing cervical cancer. We talked about doing pap smears, doing that evaluation of women. First, you just do a pap smear. You go in, you look, and you take a scrape of the cervix. You look at it, take a scrape, put it on a slide. You put something to hold it, right, to fix it. Goes to the lab. A specialist would look at it. A cytologist looks at that slide, at the cells, and see whether there are any changes. All right? Now, you can still do that, but you can still do other tests like doing what we call a visual inspection using acetic acid. I think we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, where you use just simple vinegar, and we talked about like when you buy chicken and you put it into the bit of water and it gets white. The intact part doesn't get white; it's just there's still, but the edges that are cut. So if you have an inflamed edge or a broken edge on the cervix is broken in any way because of inflammation or otherwise, or even a malignancy, then the visual inspection will tell you, it is very likely because of where it is, because there is a place on the cervix, we know, that where cervical cancer comes off. So if it's within that zone, You say, oh, this person had, But what we're doing, apart from doing the pap smears, well, that's VIA. And from there, you send the person on. That can be done in the community by a nurse, by a doctor in the community, right? I'm talking about primary care. You're not in hospital yet, right? You're not seeing a specialist yet. So the nurses who are trained, the doctors who know how to do this, right? That's the VIA, where they look, and if there's a suspicious lesion, they send them to the specialist, who would know, do it again, use another solution and see what's there. Take a sample, send for biopsy, and figure out whether there's cancer or not. And how the cancer is greeted is, a carcinoma in situ is just right there, or it's spreading further along, okay? Or if you have precancerous lesion. And so we can treat. So there's a lot that happens before a woman should die, okay? Or should become ill enough or have severe cancer that's so extensive that she can die. The other thing, just doing a regular pap smear, like I said, take a sample, you put it, the doctor sees, oh, we have cells here that are cancerous cells. And then you go to the specialist and they do what they have to do, right? And again, they probably do the same colposcopy we call it. They put in colposcopy, and you look at that part of your body using a scope, right? And they take a sample, send to the lab. And sometimes, depending on how extensive or how non-extensive these cancerous lesions are, these cancerous cells, how far they penetrate to the cervix, you can just remove a part of the cervix. You do a loop, you just cut it off. All right? They cut off that part and stitch it back. You remove the cancerous cells, and the woman is cured. All right? No. It is important that we have the services that all our women require, but it's also important that women know that I'm at risk if I've been sexually active, and I need to do my pap smears. I need to go get checked. The other thing that happens now, the advance that's going to happen, apart from doing a pap smear, apart from doing a VIA, we're going to have actual testing of the secretions to look for the presence of the human papillomavirus in the woman's cervix and in the vaginal area, whether there's any HPV. You can do blood tests as well, but look for and to see if there's HPV, see what type of what typing, type is it a number 16, number 18, a number 1, a number 53, whatever it is, right? That is present. We also know that different populations in the Caribbean have a predominance of different numbers. Okay? In Grenada, I think we have 53 and something. I don't remember what it is. Right? So now we have a third thing that we can do to test whether our women have cancer or not, or whether they're at risk. And if we were to vaccinate our girls like they've done they've had a long program in, like we talked about it before, in New Zealand and Australia, we'll find that less and less women are going to be diagnosed with cancer of the cervix. Okay? And that is what we want to do. We want to get to a point where we have not 10 per 100,000, probably 1 or 2, because it's going to happen. You're going to have patients who are going to come up once in a while. But to the point where you can consider that we have eradicated cancer of the cervix. And why do we want to do this? Because cancer of the cervix tends to affect younger women in the childbearing age. My cousin's mom died at 32, having her 3 children. And a lot of women who have cancer of the cervix are much younger. And so we are trying to encourage our women to ensure that they do their screening, that they make sure that their pap smears are done on a regular basis, and know that we will have eventually HPV. We do have HPV vaccine that our girls are given the HPV vaccine. So as the generations go further, we'll have less and less possibility of having HPV. But we can also vaccinate our boys, because our boys are the ones who are going to give it to the thing. Because apart from causing human papillomavirus, causing cervical cancer, because the virus tends to like to affect the mucosa, like the mouth, like the throat, that kind of tissue, which is similar to what's in on the cervix, the anus, right? The head of the penis. So we want to make sure that we can vaccinate our people to prevent HPV. And so parents, it might not want to give their girls the one, might also want to give their boys the vaccine to prevent the boys having the vaccine and have the possibility to develop thin cancers of the penis and other places, right? And not transmitting it to a partner, even if they may have gotten it. Well, that they shouldn't have gotten it, so they can transfer it to a partner if you have one-on-one partner, one-on-one sexual partner. I'm waiting for you. Look like you're going to ask something.
No. I'm following. I'm going to ask, but not yet. I'm waiting for the right time.
Right time I never come.
No, it will come. Mm-hmm.
So this is a call, and I had to do this because this program is gonna come on stream. I just want to remind our women that these things are preventable diseases that you can take into hand and say, I'm not going to have this. My daughter, my granddaughters are not going to be victims of cancer of the cervix because I'm going to use the services that are there. I'm going to ensure that my daughters are vaccinated. There is also the possibility of vaccinating young adults up to like 25. In some environments, it's not going to be available free, but if you're 24-year-old, let's say, or 23-year-old, and you go to the pap smear and you do an HPV and your HPV test is negative, you can access your vaccine. Now they were given 2 vaccines before, right? But now it's only 1. There's research, and that's why research is so important. It's only 1 vaccine in the 9 to 14 age group, enough to prevent the development of HPV related diseases, so that you don't get infected by the vaccine and have diseases that are related to HPV. So I remember when we were doing medical school, and children get MMR, they will get the measles vaccines, and we are almost about in the Caribbean to say that we had eradicated, because we had we had almost 100% vaccination against measles, right? And I was working in the ER. This is probably the early 90s or very late 80s. I was working in the ER, and a lady brought her daughter who had measles. And I said to her, why haven't you vaccinated the kid? She says, no, my daughter is vaccinated. And patients in that jurisdiction always walk with the children's immunization card to say that because immunization was a thing that they accepted greatly, right? And she said, no, my daughter's fully immunized. And look at it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it looks like you're going to have to give another dose. You're going to have to give a booster dose of the measles vaccine. And it's funny because in a week, the Brits were saying, oh, we had this outbreak and we're going to have to give children a second shot, just to boost, right, the first immunization. So at 4 or so, before the kids go up to preschool, they get to kindergarten level, like 4, 5, they get a second shot of the MMR. But MMR is a compound. It has measles, mumps, and rubella, which is German measles. And so now our kids get their first shot and a second shot, and we haven't seen any breakdown. Unfortunately, we've been seeing a lot of diseases that we thought were eradicated, like measles, in places where the whole vaccine acceptance is not as prevalent as it has been before, where parents are, especially after COVID, people have decided that they're not going to take vaccines for whatever reason. The truth is that what we have done is gone all the way back. It's really gone back and seen diseases that we thought we had gotten rid of reappear simply because we refuse to allow our children to be vaccinated, and they suffer greatly as a result of that option, that choice.
Right. So let me just jump in here. And you gave quite a bit of information, but my question is, are there different types of cervical cancer that maybe more? There are a couple that probably are a little more detrimental than others, or?
What I know is that you have different stages.
Yeah, I know about the stages. Yeah, but.
Right? What I know, you have different stages, and what I'm saying is that if we doing routine, regular cervical screening, we're able to capture very early those early changes, like simple inflammation, just having a cervical infection or an inflammation, right? That will predispose to having broken tissue, having acquiring broken tissue, especially broken tissue on the cervix, because then the virus will penetrate even easier into the cervical tissue, right? But staging is what is important.
Okay.
Going from one stage from a simple inflammation that you can treat and follow up, because sometimes you have to redo your pap smear and make sure that's not there anymore, and to having a fully invasive cancer that goes into your, takes off your lymph nodes, goes into your abdomen, goes elsewhere, and can cause death.
Right.
Which is what we say.
Right. What about the risk factors?
So risk factors. So who can get cancer? Who are likely to get cancer of the cervix? First of all, women, okay, because they're the ones who have cervices, okay? They're the ones with a cervix. Women who initiate sexual intercourse very early in life. Women who have multiple partners, maintain relationships with multiple partners, and women who have recurrent infections from other sexually transmitted diseases, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, etc., right? Because the truth is that all those STD agents kind of hang out together. I don't know, for some reason they're good friends, so they're always together, right? Women who, in all cancers, women who smoke, women who, alcohol, we know is one of the challenges, right? Women who have had a lot of kids, especially if you started having children very early, right? And of course, death by cervical cancer comes from not screening. I'm trying to remember what other risk factors. Of course, you have to have HPV, the HPV virus, and that is why we ask women to, if you're going to indulge in intercourse, wear a condom.
Right.
Wear a condom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about exposure to medicine that help to prevent like miscarriage and stuff like that?
I'm not too sure about that.
Okay. Right. Now, I was just doing some, reading and so on. I came across a couple of them. So that was one of the things. Medication known as DES.
Diethylstilbestrol.
Right.
Yes, that is also an agent that has been used a lot to abort.
Right. Okay.
It does put women at greater risk for having cervical cancer, but more ovarian cancer than cervical cancer.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about, although we spoke of prevention earlier on, maybe we could go into some more details because, and maybe explain in more detail the importance of women having their pap smears and when they should have it. And in other words, I know you said it's very good earlier among young women, but what about, let's say, women who are let's say late 30s, 40s? Can you still do a pap smear?
That's not all women, that's young women.
Right.
So the thing is that once you've initiated sexual activity, you really should be having pap smears.
Okay.
And even more now that we are going to be doing, we have a pilot program that we're going to start, and Grenada is going to have a pilot program. Grenada I think Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Antigua in this part of it, somebody else, right? We're going to have that HPV testing facilitated by PAHO. Even more so, now that we're going to have HPV testing on attempting a pap smear or whatever you're looking for, whatever test we're going to do to ascertain whether somebody has cervical cancer, any changes in the cervix that can lead to cervical cancer. They are going to be doing the HPV testing. So it's very important because, like I said, if your HPV is negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to come back in 5 to 10 years for your pap smear. If your HPV is positive, you have to be back in a year or two, right? So there's a difference, and hence the reason why we should make sure that our girls are vaccinated, right? You can check when we would know if our girls are responding to the vaccine when they come for their pap smears as young women who have become sexually active. We check, and there's no HPV present.
Right.
Because every population is going to behave differently, okay? You expect different responses. And like I said, there are different vaccines, there are different strains of the virus, different flavors, for want of a better word, right? And some populations have some populations have others, okay? What predominates depends on where you are. And of course, if you live in Antigua, and Antiguan women are having intercourse with the Antiguan men, it's likely that is where they're going to be sharing what is already there, right? But if you're going all over the place, you probably have more that you can share because you'll have different varieties that probably predominate in different territories, and that's the story.
Right. So it is said when cervical cancer begins, you may not necessarily see any symptoms, but as it grows, then the symptoms would probably start coming on. What kind of symptoms, should give cause to lift an eyebrow?
I don't want to even reach there because I'm still preventing cervical cancer, okay? And I'm still doing early screening for pap smear, but you probably won't have any symptoms, okay? But you might also have like a recurrent infection. You have vaginal secretions that are not necessarily healthy. And that is why when you go, if you have an STD, you really should have a pap smear done at that time as well, okay? You may not have any secretions, but then you may have bleeding on contact, right? Mm-hmm. You may have bleeding on contact, you may have persistent spotting, even if you're not having sex. You may have, if it's more extensive, you may have pain in your lower abdomen, pain in your lower abdomen, but also pain in your pelvis, right? On the sides as it spreads. But that is a long way after having a simple inflammation of your cervix. And that is what we really want to. We don't want to have any woman who goes into the stage where she has full-blown, she has cervical cancer that is probably inoperable. And like I said, if you have CIN1, you can just take off the neck of the uterus, right? It goes a little further. They can do a hysterectomy, remove the whole uterus, and you're fine. And they'll look and they'll check you don't have any answer, but they'll check the vault and make sure there are no cells growing there, right? If you have had a little more extensive cervix cancer, but we don't want to get to the stage where women have to be checked back 5-6 times to see whether or not she's improved, where she's had to have chemotherapy and radiation therapy and all of that. And also, we don't want to have our women having kidney failure because we have lymph nodes that have been affected by the cancer cells that prevent that compress her ureters, those things that come from the kidneys into the bladder. There's one thing that I want us to mention because it is not only having intercourse, penis and vagina, that can cause. Remember, a lot of people indulge in oral sex, right? And we know that all men are likely to get oral sex, likely to get cancers of the mouth and the throat, and related to HPV, right? from having oral sex with women who have HPV and we don't know, because you don't have no symptoms, you know. You can have HPV and don't know nothing happening, it's just there. All right? If, for example, you happen, no, I shouldn't say that. So you can have HPV and nothing happens. All right? Because I can tell you, remember that a lot of the people who are affected by HPV are actually, their bodies can actually eliminate the viruses, but there are those who will go on to have challenges with their cervix, and that's what we want to prepare. That's what we want to provide. Remember also, if you have a man may have oral sex with one woman and then have oral sex with the next woman, can transfer the virus to the other woman. So those are the challenges. And even if you have same-sex unions, same-sex relationships, that can happen, transfer. So therefore, even women who are only having relationship with women should really also have their pap smears and be checked for HPV.
Right. What does it mean to have an abnormal pap smear?
An abnormal pap smear means that the normal cellular structure of the mucous membrane is altered. So you see a lot of inflammatory cells. So you take a scrape. So think about the inside of your lip, right? You take like a lollipop stick. It looks like that. Or you can take a little brush, and what you do is rub some of the cells off, put it into a fluid, into a liquid. The cytologist, the specialist in looking at cells, looks at it and see, oh, these cells are intact, right? And it might be a little different based on where you are in your menstrual cycle. If you don't have menstrual cycle, they may have a little change. They may be one way, but an abnormal pap smear can range from anything from having inflammatory cells to having cancer cells.
Okay.
That is what cells.
Okay.
Abnormal pap smear. Oh, every cell thing is intact. We don't see any sign of infection. There's nothing. No yeast. No nothing. That's a normal pap smear. Come back in 2 years.
Okay.
But no, a normal pap smear might include you having HPV positive. When we include that component, it's a little higher, but it's more specific and it's more. It will tell us more whether we have a greater risk. Because, like I said, if you don't have HPV, you should not develop cancer of the cervix.
Right. So is there a cutoff age for the HPV vaccine?
Yeah, I said earlier. So in our normal extended program of immunization, HPV vaccine is given to girls and to boys between 9 to 14 because of the great immune response. Their bodies create enough antibodies to be able to fight off the cells, the virus, should they come in contact with it, regardless of how they come in contact with it. Okay? That's part of our normal vaccination program. If you check and you don't have HPV, they say up to 24, you can have the vaccine. Some say 26, some say 24. I say 25. And that's
but I was just, like I said, I was been, reading up some stuff, and I came across, actually from Mayo Clinic, which I use quite a lot, that the age for the vaccine have been increased to include adults up to age 45.
Yeah, but but you're gonna have to go get it yourself. And like I tell you, as we do more and more research, right? I know that PAHO and WHO would say 24, right? Because remember that the level of immune response, the younger you are, the greater the response, the greater the coverage. So maybe if you get it at 35 and 40, you probably need to get another vaccine again because your body doesn't produce as much antibodies as happens with the younger population.
Right. What is pre-cervical cancer?
All that inflammation, when you have inflammatory changes, which could be caused from getting infection, could be caused from having a lot of intercourse where you have friction on the cervix. So that's or where you start to see cells that are, I don't mean not normal, but if they're not cancerous cells, that's the pre-stage.
Right.
And you'd want to treat those patients and say, I'll see you back in 6 months. Let's redo this pap smear.
Okay.
Where you have abnormal cells, where it's not just the normal cell along the wall of the face of the cervix.
Right.
So you want to make sure that anything that is not normal cells, you worry. Okay, when you see the cells are changing in their shape and in their what it looks like, the morphology of the cell changes, then you want to follow that person a little closer.
And during that period, can you still get your HPV vaccine?
If you're negative for HPV, yeah.
Okay.
You can only get the HPV vaccine. You should only get an HPV vaccine if you don't have HPV.
Right.
And like I said, remember, in our environment, the only person that gets free HPV vaccines are girls between 9 to 14. Some patients ask for their boys to have it, and they probably will get it. And the pediatricians will give it to them, because the pediatricians will give the kids, right? But anybody out of that age is going to have to buy their own vaccines.
Right. Okay. So let's talk a bit about cervical cancer and fertility. If let's say, for example, maybe in the early stages, you have cervical cancer, can the woman still get pregnant?
You can get pregnant, but guess what? What stage of cervical cancer are you talking about?
Well, you're the expert. I am not sure.
So one of the times when we do 2 times pap smears. You do pap smears during pregnancy, do a pap smear, and some women in the 6 weeks clinic, they do a follow-up pap smear. Okay? That's normal. Another lady, and this is probably 20 years ago, somebody who I'd known from after I came from medical school. I just known her. And she came to my office one New Year's Eve. She had a baby early in the year, like February, right? So she has this infant on her shoulder. And she had another little child who was probably like a toddler, and one a little older than that. Old enough, right? Probably like 6, like 9. She had these 3 boys. And she came bearing an x-ray because she needed help. She said, I have no money. Can you see me? I said, what's going on? She did an x-ray and nobody can tell her what's going on. Guess what? For too long, she had had a baby in February, remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she would have had a pap smear earlier in the year. But somebody did her pap smear and did not tell her. And by the time, because she was having what we call contact bleed. You have intercourse, you bleed. I'm not talking about spotting, she was bleeding. Okay? So I said to her, let's see what's going on down there. And I just had to abort my thing, because it looked like, when you buy liver, I'm going to be a little graphic. When you cut liver, that's all I saw. Right? But your cervix was like inside my lip. Inside of your lip. The healthy part of inside your lip, right? And this woman's cervix looked like what we call fungating, like a piece of liver. You touch it and it beat, like when you cut the liver, right? This was already far gone, to the point where she had a spread to her lungs, right? Almost no sane lung tissue, just all this fluid in there. And I said, she went to hospital and never left. She died 6 weeks later because she had this, this very extensive cervical cancer with metastases. Eventually attacked her brain, spread to her brain, and she died. It is very important, therefore, that not only that people do a pap smear, but you make sure and get the results of a pap smear. When we set up a system to do screening of our women for cancer, any disease, even if you do a blood test for a patient to see if they have anemia, you kind of need to find it and be able to go through to the patient. It's a responsibility we have as healthcare providers, right? We must ensure that thing is seen. Now, this is a lady who she's not a very educated, very nice woman, But she expects that when she goes back to her clinic, that they'll be able to tell her, your pap smear is okay. And she doesn't ask because she probably doesn't remember or doesn't know she should ask. If nurse tells you everything is okay, then you would think that everything is okay, right? But I want our population to be empowered to ask, what happened to my pap smear? What happened to my sugar test? Don't be afraid to ask questions, because that is responsibility you have to yourself to ensure that you're able to acquire information that is related to your well-being. Okay? Patients also have to take that responsibility. We cannot hand it over because you're the only patient. Nurse has 500 patients, yet you're the only patient that you have to worry about. Do you understand? So, do a pap smear, yes, but make sure you get your results. Doing a pap smear and getting your results is very important because sometimes it's easy to get lost because it just put on a little slide, a little glass slide, and that can get lost. That can be labeled improperly or not labeled. So those are things that we have as professionals to ensure that they're done. So if I do 6 pap smears today, the 6 ladies' name must be written, right? And the date must be written. It must be done properly, covered properly, and stored in boxes on their own with appropriate identification. In like pattern, when the lab person looks at my slide, he must say, "This is Sonia's slide," or "This is Mary's slide," and my slide must not be Mary's, and Mary's slide must not be mine. So there are all those little things we have to take into consideration, right? Mm-hmm. Just making sure that efficiency is managed throughout, so that patients have the proper diagnosis and it's done properly. Just take it as doing a pap smear is not just like that, you know. There are techniques for doing that. We must make sure that we have a trained staff, trained medical personnel, health personnel who do it properly. So when you take a scrape, you have to make sure, because the technician can tell you which part of the cervix it came from. So sometimes you scrape and you don't get anything. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you a story. I remember doing a pap smear for a girl, and I think I'm kind of technically, skilled. And I did a girl's cervix. And when the results came back, right, they didn't see any cervical cells. So she comes back. It turned out the girl was a drug mule. And was carrying drugs up in her vagina. And the caustic, whatever, effect of the drugs just obliterated the cells of her cervix. They just were not there. So her cervix looked like the cervix of a person who had passed the menopause, and she was in her 30s.
Wow.
So there are all these things you kind of need to know to take into consideration. An older woman's cervix will look different from a younger, from a 15-year-old, from a 21-year-old, from somebody who's pregnant, from somebody who is not pregnant, from somebody who has had their cervix removed, has had surgery. So the clinicians need to be educated appropriately, and we need to get information. So patients must also be ready to give all the information that is necessary to ensure efficiency in evaluating your status.
Right,
okay?
Right, yeah. Excellent, because I was about to ask you, how can someone be the best patient in a case like that, to help your physician to, but you've preempted and answered. So my question.
No, and that's not the end of it, because I think, and I'm going to put my colleagues, ourselves back on the line, because I think we have a responsibility to make our patients the best patients ever. It comes with trust. It comes with understanding. It comes with having a good patient-provider relationship. And that is based fundamentally on trust, on appropriate communication, explaining to people what you're doing. Like, don't go on the bed. Move your foot. Do this, do that. You need to speak and say, here's what is going to happen. Here's what to expect. This is what it's. You have to inform patients as to what, not just procedurally, but technically what is happening, right? Why we have to do this? What am I doing? What is an HPV test? Why am I doing this? When are you going to get this back? Right? When are you going to get this back? When you're not going to, when you get it back, what do you expect to find? What I see, what I think it might be. Because sometimes you see and you kind of need to treat. At least there might be some bacterial infection or some inflammation. They say, I'm going to treat you still because they have a little bit of inflammation here. Right? But let's see what your pap smear says. So that makes best patients if you support the person to be a best patient, right? And if we kind of need to speak the same language, we need to speak the same language, we need to have the same cultural approach, right? And people scared. Putting up a speculum inside a woman's body is not an easy thing to do, right? It's not an easy thing for them. You have a skills for placing a speculum, but it's very invasive, you know. So,
right. Can things like ultrasound and so show differences in the cervix that can probably cause the physician to be more inclined to do a test?
I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if that's necessary because just visually you can determine whether there are changes in the cervix. If you know what you're doing, you should be able to determine visually.
Okay.
So if you have a full-blown cancer that looks like an ulcer on the thing in that zone that is related to where the cancer appears, when you're supposed to know that, okay, that's knowledge you're supposed to go in with. Then you will you don't need an ultrasound. Ultrasound doesn't really come in here. Ultrasound does bigger soft tissue and stuff.
Okay. So my final question.
Are we going to take a break?
Yeah. But after this, so we know it's generally a very difficult thing to tell someone that after diagnosis that they're
after the break, because that's gonna take a little chatting.
Well, it's just the break is just going to be
because I have a little crisis going on currently.
Before we wrap. Okay, so let's take the break and then we'll come back. No problem. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you want to take control of your money? AIDS, cancer.
In Grenada, sports aren't just a game, they're a way of life. They teach discipline, teamwork, and resilience. They inspire the next generation to push boundaries and chase excellence. That's why the Investment Migration Agency of Grenada is proud to support sports initiatives as part of our commitment to youth and national development. When we invest in sports programs, we invest in the future. We invest in the health and well-being of our youth, and we invest in broadening Grenada's reach, proudly connecting our athletes, our talent, and our nation to a global community. Together, we all go further. The Investment Migration Agency, unlocking the possibilities.
Sunrise Diagnostic Center is the place to visit for your medical laboratory test, ultrasound, X-ray, mammogram, ECG, and ultrasound guided and bone density test. Also available are COVID PCR and antigen tests. Most results are available within 24 hours. Sunrise Diagnostic Center is located at number 9 NS Building, Melville Street, St. George's, with sub-offices in Grand Anse, Wall Street, and Grenville, St. Andrew. Visit Sunrise Diagnostic Center today at any of their offices or call 440-3709 or cell phone 415-9522. Welcome to Cafe Lola, located at True Blue in St. George, the perfect place to study, celebrate, or simply unwind, where coffee meets elegance and every detail is made to delight. From fresh bakes to custom-made orders, cakes, waffles, pancakes, donuts, and many delicious, irresistible treats. They are your neighborhood cafe and bakery. Make Cafe Lola your go-to spot for fun, flavor, and to put a little sparkle into your life. Good Vibes Only opens Monday to Sunday from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays 7 a.m. to 12 midnight. Cafe Lola, your number one spot. Visit today. For more information, call 404-4446.
The countdown is on for the most exciting relay showdown in the nation. The IMA National Relay Meet, started for Saturday, February 21st, 2026, 3 p.m. at the Kirani James Athletic Stadium. Come witness speed, relentless competition, and hot pound astounding relays that will keep you at the edge of your seats from start to finish. The island's fastest teams will battle for glory, but who will rise to the top and claim the prizes? You have to be there to see live. Admission finish line $50, main stand $30, secondary stand $20, and bleachers $15. Children 12 and under pay $15 for main and secondary stands and bleachers. Get your tickets. Feel the speed. The IMA National Relay Meet 2026, the ultimate relay experience.
Looking to shop online from your favorite stores like Amazon and Shein? With GPC Global, it's never been easier. Get your very own US address and shop from around the world. With GPC Global, you can order the latest trends and must-have items, all delivered straight to Grenada to your closest post office for your pickup. We offer the cheapest rates, and our service is reliable and quick. No more waiting for weeks for your packages. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. Join the Grenada Postal family today and start shopping smarter. Visit us online at www.grenadapostal.com or call us on 437-POST. That's 437-7678. GPC Global, your gateway to the world.
Drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Welcome back. It's Dr. and Cole. So, Doc, final question. It's never an easy thing to break the news to someone that, there is the possibility of cancer. Doesn't matter where, which part. It's usually a difficult thing. And I guess it's because of the nature of the beast. People just have this natural scare, about it. As a physician, and we're talking cervical cancer, you've done the tests, and what you're seeing is probably not good news, to break to the patient, meaning that the cells are abnormal and that clearly something is happening there. As a physician, how do you break that to the patient so that you make them as comfortable as possible, that they don't leave thinking that, well, by the time I drop from the bus, I'll be dead. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I want to start from the end first. I want to start from the future first. I hope that in the future, we don't have to tell anybody they have cancer, because we'd have been screening and vaccinating and regular screening, and because the importance of doing screening at all is to have early diagnosis. Screening means that you look for disease that has yet no symptoms, okay? That are not symptoms. Looking, and then when you're doing early diagnosis or diagnosing, patient may or may not have symptoms, but you go in there and you probably find something. Education of patients every time they're looking for any health service is very important, because I think people need to know what they're up against. We must have very simple and informative and educational and supportive and positive ways of transmitting information. The fact that a woman comes for a pap smear means that she's supposed to understand or made to understand exactly what a pap smear is. So there's a thing about pre-test counseling. If you're going to do any test on a patient, you need to tell them what is this, what you're going to do, what you're going to do, what is this specular, what is this, and then of course you need to tell them why you're doing the test, what you expect to find, what is the disease we're talking about, how disease is likely to progress, right? So that alone should help to facilitate. If you give the patient enough information, one of the challenges with testing any diagnostic test that requires biopsy, doing like any cellular level evaluation, you have a little time between. So you need to tell people what is expected. The point is when you do a pap smear, you see stuff. It's in front of you. You may not be able to say, "Oh, you have a cancer." You said, "No, there's some inflammation here. This is likely to happen. This may be or may not be." You don't have to compromise yourself anyway. You can say, "I've seen a little bit of inflammation. I'm going to take this. Here is what is likely to be." So you always inform the patient of the possible outcomes. Okay? And to let the patient know if you have stage 1, that can be corrected by just cutting it off, the leaf. Or if you have severe inflammation with precancerous lesions, you can just burn it off with using cryotherapy, very cold frozen gas, okay? Frozen nitrogen, right? That you put on the cervix, kills off the cell, forms a scar, and it drops off, and the cell should be healed. What you do after that, you follow up. But here, you're not going to just put a woman on a stirrup, scrape off her uterus and say, "Come back in 6 weeks for your results." There must be some preparation that you give to everybody to whom you're going to do that kind of intervention, right? If the patient already has a lesion that is obvious, you'll say, "Here's what it is," okay? And I'm going to send you directly to the specialist, right? You tell her, "Sure, I'm not happy with what I see here, and I think you require further intervention," and try and get a fast track referral for them to the specialist. So it's not like, "Yes, you have it, no, you have it, yes, you have it, and you go dead, no, you have it, and you're not going dead." You understand? Every individual, you have to care for every individual as an individual. It's just you and Miss Jane in this environment. And Miss Jane's situation is Miss Jane's situation. Whether she just have a normal pap, she have a slightly abnormal pap, which is just inflammatory tissue. You have a CIN1, you have a CIN2, you have a further out. The bottom line is that you have to treat Miss Jane as her, but you have to make Miss Jane know, here are the possibilities. That is why we do a pap smear, what is likely to come, and what is the therapy that's available. Okay. I hope that answers the question.
Oh yes, no, definitely, because I think, and I think that's one of the, very important part of, patient-physician interaction. Making the patient as comfortable as possible, because I think that too would keep them in good spirits, and I think a patient being in good spirits can also help. They help with the whole process. So I think that is very critical. So, well, we
trust. The patient has to know that you're coming to them with information that you want them to trust you, right? That you want them to trust you, and you have to be informed as a healthcare provider to make that trust be something that is second nature.
Right.
The patient wants to say, "No, I trust Dr. Tom because he makes me." Not that you make me feel comfortable, not that you take all the responsibility, but that you and the patient work in partnership, because it's really just about the patient's well-being and often about your name, right? So, but we have to prepare ourselves as professionals, and that's why there is going to be training, right? When we embark on this program, that's a little more comprehensive to take in the whole issue of HPV. And there are lots of women who never heard about HPV before because it wasn't something that we knew about. It's only in recent times we've been recognizing 99% of women who have cancer of the cervix have this virus. Here are the viruses that are usually the ones that seem to be most likely to cause you to have cancer. Because we've done research, and a lot of research, okay? It is also important for us that in Grenada, for us to have the better outcomes, that we have as many women as possible being screened. So if we have 6,000 women in the community that at the stage of their life where they should be having pap smears, we would like the 6,000 of them to come and get a pap smear, right? And make sure that we can separate those who have challenges, who are predisposed, from those who are not predisposed. And like I said, now that we should be doing HPV screening, a woman who does not have a positive HPV knows that she doesn't need to come for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And if in the next 5 to 10 years she has that intercourse, where's she going? Because we know that we get this virus from sexual intercourse. You got me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, well, we're basically out of time.
I want to share next anecdote, which led to the whole issue of sexual intercourse being a predisposing factor, right? A risk factor for. When they started studying, there are two groups. They studied some nuns who were virgins, right, at death, and they did postmortems on their cervixes. I guess they probably would have given their bodies. You can't do it without asking. That's part of the ethics, okay? And they discovered that these women who had never had intercourse had no changes in their cervix. We were not even doing HPV then. That's a long time ago, okay? That's in the days when I was in medical school, okay? And we also discovered in the Jewish population, one, where they have monogamy, and two, where they do circumcision so that the virus can't hide itself behind the foreskin. We don't circumcise a lot in our culture, but remember, Jewish boys are circumcised on day 7, so they don't have place where that the virus can hide itself in that gunk we call smegma. People who don't maintain good hygiene, men who don't maintain good hygiene, when they pull their foreskin back, they'll find this grummy-looking secretion. Well, can get a little rough, like doughy, okay? Called smegma, which houses a lot of bacteria, and on which, if you've had contact with HPV, it will be there. And it will also be there. But in the case of the Jewish population, the men are all vaccinated, and they get married and they still one wife. But even if they were having sex with other women, because of that part of the hygiene where there's no foreskin to trap the virus and that secretion, there's a lower risk of cervical cancer in the Jewish women.
Okay, wonderful. So, Doc, again, thank you so very much for being here and sharing such valuable information. I trust that our listeners, as we always say, at least find one thing that they can take away. All right. And Doc, correct me here if I'm wrong, but I do believe, from our many discussions on cervical cancer, it's probably one of the easiest cancers to reverse and to get rid of, So to our women...
And to prevent.
So to our women, this is very important. A lot of the illnesses that probably was once something that would frighten us, medicine has really advanced, and so we can deal with a lot of them and reverse them and continue living our normal lives. So let's pay attention to what is happening. Let's ensure that we do the best we can to maintain and to improve our wellness. That way we can live long, happy, healthy lives. Thank you very much.
There's another part of that. Before you go on, there's another, because you're a little time. There's another part of that I want to address, and it's in relation to, and I want to speak to our men on this. I want to speak to our men on two things. One, and that is the right of a woman to preserve her body. And, we have relationships, and a woman might ask you to wear a condom. It may be because she already knows she has HPV, one. It also may be because she already knows she wants to make sure that she doesn't get HPV just in case you're carrying the virus. And she has a responsibility to protect herself. So I want our men to understand that there's that point of respect that we must practice when it comes to consensual sexual relationships and beyond. Okay? And beyond. Whether or not the relationship is consensual. Men force themselves upon women. Men force themselves upon women, forgetting that there's always a risk of they be getting infected or they infect the woman with whatever the woman never had before. And also, as a woman, I want to decry the ultimate force on our 2 young women in the last 2 weeks. In 11 days, we have had 2 young women murdered, most likely by men who are older than them, men who are stronger than them, men who have a little more power, and maybe economic or physical power. And I want to condemn this in this forum. It is wrong. I do not support it. I believe in justice for everybody. But hear what? I want to tell our men that it is incorrect. It's just wrong, right? To feel that you must control a woman, that you must do whatever you want. No, it can't be accepted. Because something as simple as that. And there are lots of women who are sexually abused and physically abused who do not come forward. We have to support these women. I saw a guy wrote today, and I responded that, how some women set up themselves. So listen, stop talk like that, please. Okay? Set up themselves for what they experience, or the way they do it. No, stop talk like that. In other words, I can stand up in the middle of the road and you know that you can't knock me down so you can drive. And you have to keep yourself quiet. Walk on the side of the road. And you respect me just as I would respect you as a pedestrian, you must respect me as a pedestrian. I don't do anything I want. I don't stand in the middle of the road so you can drive away, although people do it on Melville Street. Is the most chaotic place. But we have to respect each other regardless of how the other person behaves. The ultimate respect is what comes out of you. So we're gonna stop pointing finger in a woman's face and in a man's face as well. We're gonna stop pointing fingers at each other and just simply respect each other for being a human being. We need to protect our women because for the most part, our women are the vulnerable part of the population. They have less money, they have greater need, they have many children, they need support. They really go through a lot, and they're physically incapable of fighting you off when you commit any form of violence. So men, I'm going to ask our men and boys to start talk to each other about this and what our responsibilities are towards our women folk, our mothers, our sisters, our little sister, our girlfriends, our cousin. Okay? Men, you have a responsibility to honor and respect. It doesn't matter who she is, what kind of lifestyle she lives. The respect that you demonstrate is a reflection of your character.
Okay.
I might use wrong words, so let's
well, I sometimes, and I totally agree with you, but sometimes when I hear talks like that, I wonder if these things wouldn't continue. Because one of the questions I have is, people like yourself who are in a position to influence young women, are we teaching our young women how to not place themselves in situations of danger?
Are we teaching our young men how to not to become dangerous to our women?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much. We had a good discussion. Let's keep it that way. Until next Tuesday, folks. All the best. Do have a good night.
Podcasting.
Drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer,